And then the bulk of this talk, we're going to get into when we have deficits in the left and the right hemisphere. I'm going to give a couple case examples. And then finally, I'm going to talk about how we can integrate better, what we can do. And a final thing is I'm going to talk about Ian McGilchrist's implications with the left and right hemisphere, how that reflects on us as a species and globally. There's some really fascinating implications as we've become overly left hemisphere focused. And just to give a beginning to that right now, as I was reading about all this, language before 4th BC, before 4th century BC, language was actually read right to left, which is the way the right hemisphere prefers to read it. And there were oftentimes like not spaces between the words, and also there were not vowels. So it's just interesting the way society has progressed. It's come to be more and more left hemisphere dominant, not just in the way the language is written and perceived by the brain. And what I mean by that is even in East Asian cultures where information used to be processed like in Arabic, there's certain way that where it's still read right to left. But what we're seeing is that it's now primarily processed in the left hemisphere, whereas I'm just summarizing what's in McGilchrist's book. But before, there used to be more a processing of that information from the right hemisphere. So what we're seeing is like a corralling of, at a mass level, of people almost being forced to be more left hemisphere dominant. And you see that fast forwarding till today with the Zoom meeting, which is so this is so funny. I'm like the perfect personification of it. And social media too. And, you know, it requires reading and it requires categories you either like or you know, and what happens when you have a category or a line is you don't have an opportunity for all the things that aren't on that line. And the question really that I want everyone to think about is what are we missing? What are we leaving out when we tend to be dominant on one or the other? And the takeaway message that I'm going to say at the end that I'm going to say here is that there's definitely things we can do in our thinking and the way we approach life that can integrate the two. And I would say it all begins with us being aware of our body sensations, like our breath, and being mindful of what it means to care for ourselves and others. When you just look at all the research, when people become more integrated, they have a feeling of connection and they have a sense of meaning beyond the solo self. So let's just begin this marathon.